So, Khaled, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for agreeing to appear and answer a few questions about your operations. So, please let's start by telling me a little bit about AfricInvest, how it came to be, and what your activities are currently.
So, thanks, Gavin. Thanks for inviting me. AfricInvest was started in 1994 and was started initially as a small private equity boutique that was focusing on SMEs in Tunisia and was investing, doing $500,000 to $1 million investment in Tunisia. And very soon, it specialized into minority investment into family-owned companies, starting with small part of the SME segment, and then growing gradually to basically SME and small and mid-cap investment at the time. And from a geographical standpoint, we started from being a purely Tunisian player to now becoming a Pan-African player. And our common denominator to everything that we do is Africa. We are a specialized, basically, investment firm today in private equity, in venture capital, in also private debt in Africa.
Okay, and could you perhaps describe your structure, where you have offices, how many people you have, and what are your total assets under management?
So today we have about 85 people, professionals, that are spread over 9 or 10 offices, actually now 10 offices. 8 of them are on the continent. And we try basically to be present in every single economic hub of the continent. So basically, the headquarters is in Tunis, and this is historical. We also present in Cairo, where we have a team that invests in Egyptian companies, in Algerian companies, in Morocco, or in Casablanca, in Moroccan companies. But we're also present in Sub-Saharan Africa, in Abidjan, that covers both West African French-speaking West African companies and Central African companies. We have an office in Lagos that covers English-speaking West Africa, and we have an office in Nairobi that covers Eastern and Southern Africa. We are yet to open an office in Johannesburg or Cape Town to cover South Africa and Southern Africa in a better way. And we have another office in the Indian Ocean part of the continent, which is in Mauritius. That basically covers it. We have also a team in Paris that invests into French companies with an African content. So that's a very different approach, what we call a cross-border approach, that we started to develop 5 years ago with an LP that suggested this strategy to us, and that we are developing. And last but not least, we also have a team in Dubai that is doing a very different thing. They invest in listed companies in the Middle East and Africa. No.
Let's move on and talk about your LPs. So please tell us who are your main limited partners of the various funds you managed, and what motivated them to become your LPs and what they're expecting from you.
So listen, we started in Tunisia with LPs that were actually with no track record, and so we started with a fund that was listed on the stock exchange, and pure private LPs that actually joined as subscriber to this fund. Since then, things evolved, and as we grew, we started to reach out to institutional investors. And a lot of these investors are what we call development financial institutions, essentially Europeans, Americans, some also Asian sovereign wealth funds are invested with us. And we do have also fund of funds and family offices. And for the last fund, also some high net worth that invest directly into our funds. But investing in a fund requires a minimum of patience as an investor. So most of our investors have a minimal amount of institutionalization of their investment practice, and require basically to have a team often dedicated to this. So that's a particularity of PE funds where you need you need such investors, and we don't provide liquidity in the short term. Liquidity usually take at least for a medium term approach, and so that also needs to be taken into account when investing into PE fund.
So turning to your investment strategy and leaving aside the investment in listed companies, could you describe what is the main investment strategy or the main investment themes of your private equity operation across the Pan-African
So we have two different objectives where we invest in a company. The first one obviously is a commercial investment or commercial returns, so to reach basically attractive returns for our investors. I mean, this is the obvious one, and we usually try to basically generate on every investment that we do a 3x multiple on a single investment, and try to return that money in a period of 5 years on every single investment. Now, this is not the only investment, the only objective that we have and that we disclose to our investors. We also want to achieve impact objectives. And so this can be measured in different ways. It can be social impact, it can be environmental impact, it can be economic impact. And so we do measure those kinds of indicators. We started doing this some time ago now, 10 to 15 years ago. And this is now becoming mainstream. Now we see a lot of funds that are pure commercial funds that have also displayed or that are displaying basically ESG and impact objectives. And so this is now in the heart of our organization. So what we try to do here is we try to develop companies, but also try to have an impact on the environment, whether that's the social environment or economic or ecological environment. This is at least very clear in our investment strategy.
I'd like to explore a little bit the African continent. So you make investments and you have a presence in North Africa, West Africa, and East Africa. So what do you see as the differences between those three different markets? Is it in terms of geography, the way you do the investments? What are the main differences that you find?
Listen, Africa is not even 3 regions or 4 regions. It's actually 54 countries, and they're all very different from each other, even when they're close to each other. There's lots of difference between, for instance, Tunisia and Nigeria, given their history and given also the way the private sector has been developed over the past 40, 50 years. It has led to extremely different both culture and also typology of companies that you find into both countries. It's exactly the same thing between Tanzania and Kenya in East Africa, or between Côte d'Ivoire and Benin. I mean, these are very different markets, and each one of them need to be taken with its own specificities. You have countries that basically have developed very actively or proactively what we call an entrepreneurial culture, and that have, and so this is linked to different things. It's very difficult to tell you exactly what are the ingredients of this. It's a mix of a culture, of educational level in the country, of level of openness in the region. It is a hub to the region, or it is a country that is completely closed on itself. The quality of the governance in the country overall, and the level of corruption. All of this has an impact basically on the ability of a private sector to shape itself. And so what is important though, from the investor standpoint, is that we need to have local people to understand local culture. It is extremely difficult to try to invest into countries where we don't understand the local specificities, the way we do business, the unsaid messages into a negotiation, and also something that is extremely important for us is to be able to invest with the right people. and this means with people with a high level of integrity. And so, and this is quite difficult to detect only in a due diligence or in discussion. You need to basically know the reputation of the people you're going to invest with, and so you need to know the history of these companies, and this is better known by people who are living in the country. And so the way we have shaped our organization and teams is that basically we try to be local wherever we open an office. So we try to have teams with local flavors, so that basically we can have that ability to basically know with whom we should be investing and whom we should not be investing, and how we should do business in each country and each region.
So turning to more the details of your investment process as a private equity fund manager, could you describe your sourcing? How do you generate a pipeline of deals? How do you source those initial opportunities for investments?
So sourcing is half a science, half an art. It's we have different sourcing channels that we have developed over time. When we started, our main sourcing channels was to go and meet with entrepreneurs one by one. I mean, and we did this for thousands of companies at the beginning. So basically, try to get to know the entrepreneurs with using long Excel listings, and basically trying to find the ones that correspond more or less to our investment targets. But also, these were at a time where the PE asset class was not known as a funding alternative to debt, and so we had to educate basically our market to the product that we were distributing. And so this was the very first, and this is an important one, because doing advertisement in the newspaper wouldn't lead basically to a great pipeline. You're probably going to get the worst of what you should get. And so that's the very first approach that we had. Then as we grew, we built networks with a very heterogeneous, I would say, network of advisors, whether these are lawyers, investment bankers, consulting firms, that get to know what you do, your added value, your appetite for risk and for different sectors. And so this is also a very good, at some point in time when things mature, very good channel for sourcing. And then third, we have this several conferences on the continent that are essentially geared towards networking, and that are very good, I would say, opportunities to meet with interesting people. And we use also these conferences basically to meet with people that we haven't had a chance to meet with before. This is true both for PE and even more so in the VC space, where you have every year renewed source of companies, basically that are new cohorts that are created. And it's important to basically keep abreast of what is happening on the continent.
So let's go to the second stage of the PE process. So you've identified a potential opportunity or had this initial meeting with an entrepreneur. So what is your screening process? Because clearly you have to make a selection at this point as to which deal is a deal that's really worth pursuing, really worth investing the time and the trouble. So what is your screening process? Do you have a specific methodology?
Yeah, we do have things have evolved over time. As we grew, we have basically designed a process where we could at the same time be able to respond quickly to requests, but also to focus on what is important to us. And so what we do is that we have in the PE space monthly and as we on a request basis screening committees where we review new deals that are coming into our door. For a deal to be presented there, we need a certain amount of information and of analysis to present the deal to the committee and basically for it to be discussed. It is a purely internal committee within a team or a team that is managing a fund, where basically they do debate about the interest to work on a specific deal and its risk elements and its upside. And basically this is in the PE space. In the VC space, we receive probably about 10 to 20 times more deal than in the PE space. It's a much more, I would say, faster moving environment from a deal standpoint. And so it's very important. So for instance, in 2020, in the VC space, we received more than 100 deals for a team of 5 people. And so we need to take decisions much faster. So often, just by email, we just screen out a lot, probably 2/3 of the deals that we receive by email or whatever the means on LinkedIn and other media. But after that, we keep the 300 that basically we debate on a weekly basis, and we try basically to take interviews with those 300. So there is probably 1 interview per day, just to get to know the entrepreneur, the founders, the mission. And usually 90% of those are a bit less, 85% of those are eliminated in our weekly deal flow meetings. And then we focus on the rest, basically 40 deals out of the 900, where we spend more time. And so this very first step is not called a screening, it's called pre-screening. It's literally to take out anything that doesn't correspond to what we need to focus on. And it's only after that that we start going to the screening process. In the VC space, we're trying now to even make the process faster. The notion of velocity in this space is extremely important as a differentiator.
So after you've performed a successful screening, you then will engage into negotiations with the company, with the founder, with the entrepreneurs. So what is your approach to negotiations, and what kind of relationship are you looking to build with the company and or the founder?
So listen, this is it's a process where where the 2 elements at the same time. There's an element of understanding the entrepreneur, assessing whether this is a person you can deal with in difficult situation over the next 4 to 5 years, and also over positive situation where you want to develop the company. So whether you have a common vision, whether you assess things in the same way, whether it is risk factors or whether it is opportunities. I mean, this is a discussion that are happening where you review basically different elements of the companies, whether it's accounts or the HR, organization, governance. And so along those discussions, you try basically to assess whether you have aligned vision on where the company should go to and how. And at the same time, you assess also the attractivity of the assets of the company itself. And it's probably both ways. The entrepreneur should also assess whether on the top of the money that we bring to the company or to the person, if this is a cash out, whether he or she is dealing with someone with whom they want to do business in the longer run. And so this is a relationship that gets built in a matter of months in the PE space, weeks in the VC space, and where basically there is this reciprocal assessment of who we're dealing with. And so so there's different element there. There's human element, which basically is about the character of the person, whether we are dealing with someone who is open to debate, to criticism, to constructive approach in terms of decision making and collaboration, or whether it's someone who's not and who has a very big ego. I mean, this is important elements basically where when we assess an entrepreneur and also his or her team. That's also an important element. And the governance of the company, and then its results. and its key differentiators, and its the normal strategic analysis of a company and financial analysis on whether this is a company that could grow and that could lead us basically to achieve the return that we are achieving. There's another approach which gets more and more important to us, which is basically the ESG and impact approach. And this is important because we introduced this very early in the process to try to understand whether we also have a common vision on those elements, and whether we believe that the entrepreneur can basically so how to say this in English, but obey by these rules or get from an ESG standpoint. So these are all of the elements that we try to put on the table before we close the deal.
Let's go on to the next stage. So once you make an investment, you now have the company in your portfolio, and you're probably going to have certain positions on the board and so forth. So could you describe, how do you set about enhancing the value of the portfolio? How do you set about managing a portfolio company? What are the main steps you take? Who's involved?
So the way we manage this is that there is a deal team for every investment that we do, and so we don't have a separate portfolio management team. It is the deal team that has sourced and structured the deal, that will basically be monitoring the company after we have closed our deal. And usually, in most cases, probably we take a board seat. We create proximity with the founders, the shareholders, the management team. We do try to interact with as many people in that environment. That's important to us, and that's really in our genes. And so this deal team usually is at least 2 persons, sometimes 3. There's a lead, usually a senior person, but not always, and a more junior person that are dedicated to this company. And the way we monitor is that there is really 2 aspects in the monitoring. There is a formal aspect where basically we sit on a board, we participate in those board meetings with a formal agenda, and then there's a lot of informal exchanges with the management team. Usually we try to organize specific meetings. Sometimes we give them a name like a strategic committee, but sometimes it's just meeting on a regular basis based on a common understanding that there are important topics that needs to be discussed in between board meetings. And so this is, to me, extremely important. It's that ability to communicate along the road in a fluid way, without all of the burden of the formality of a board, is a very important element. So whether these are through WhatsApp groups or through regular calls or through emails and exchanges. And so this allows us basically to first be informed as soon as possible when there is something that needs to be decided on, whether it's due to a positive event or a negative event. There is a crisis. There is the CFO has decided to leave. So whatever happens, we need to be informed in the shortest possible way, and that is the way we try to communicate. And then there's also about opportunities that needs to be sized quite quickly. Often these are decisions that needs to be taken at board level in some cases, and where we need to provide a much quicker answer than just the normal formal approach to things. And so that proximity is quite important. The proximity that we build with the managers and the shareholders is important to succeed basically in terms of in developing our portfolio companies.
Let's turn to the question of resources. In order for you to do these things, like execute deals and add value to the portfolio, you need resources on your side. So could you describe what kind of internal resources you have? How do you develop them? Do you work with external experts? What is your configuration of resources in order to execute your strategy?
So we started as a very small company, and so we have a culture that is also linked to our history, and a lot of the work that we do during in the life of the investment is internal. It's linked to internal resources. We have about 85 people on the team with very different, very wide skill sets. And so we often have the ability to bring people from different skill sets if we need that. So if we need someone who is a specialist of a certain region, or of microfinance, or of some specific regulation, we would try first to see who we have on the team who has that knowledge, and bring that know-how. On more high-level approaches, now we work more and more with big strategy firms, and this is really in cases where we feel that we need a revamp of the strategy of the company. We need a new digital approach, or we need basically a new. We have decided that we would go for a specific regional approach in a new region, and so we try then to open our ears and understand what is happening in the market. And strategy firms are very good for this, because basically they have intelligence information that usually we don't have access to by ourselves. And so the mix of our internal resources plus some of these firms make us allow us basically to add value. On the top of this, we've invested in about 117 companies on the continent, which is quite a sizable number already. And so we do have that ability to create synergies between portfolio companies, or between current and former portfolio companies. And so try to create a partnership in a specific market, on distribution, we also try to structure the markets where we're present in terms of industries, so that basically there is more opportunity that are created this way. I don't know if you know this thing, and if you put this one ice cream shop on the street, it's much better to have three of them than one. We have exactly the same approach. If you want to create an important and deep market, you'd rather create competition. And so we do work with that approach, and try basically to create partnership, so that this is intelligent and smart competition that is created. And so we do have this approach of working with portfolio companies on this. We do try also to source talents to portfolio companies. It is much easier for a family-run and family-owned company to hire talent when this talent know that there is an institutional shareholder in the company than just the family. And so we do try to play our role there. We have quite an important network of talents that we've been using in different circumstances, and we do tap into those talents whenever needed also.
Traditionally in Africa, exits have always been a little bit of a challenge. So how do you set about with your exit strategy in terms of structuring your deals? What are the main types of exits you've done? And how do you see the future of African exits?
That's a very good question. So when we started this business, we in a way, our very first fund was an evergreen fund, and we had no exit strategy. Very simply, we learned that we had to exit the hard way, and meaning that basically we have very little rights in our agreements to help us exit from this from our portfolio companies. And so the very first exit that we've done, a majority of them were basically sales back to shareholders, because if you have no exit rights, your best way out is basically to find an agreement with the current shareholders. So that's what we did to a large extent. Some IPOs, because we were probably lucky then the stock market was developed enough, and the companies were successful enough. Then in the past 10 years, we've started to basically be much more strict on the way we wanted to exit. So decide from the start what would be the different exit route that we would use. Remember, we're not a buyout firm, we are minority investors. So it's an important element from the start of this firm on how basically we're going to be crafting the exit in each cases. Talking and discussing openly about this question from the start with the shareholders with whom we were going to be investing. And so we open new routes. The most interesting one is trade sales. So basically is selling either a minority, but often a majority of the shareholding of the company to an industrial partner or a trade partner. So that is probably the most interesting exit, because you create, on the top of the financial value that we have created in the company, there is also a strategic value of the assets. And so that usually creates more financial value for yourself as an investor. And we've also created a new route that is coming from the fact that the private equity industry in Africa has been growing at a fast pace. And we've seen secondary exits, so exits to other funds, coming up as first or second, depending on the years, versus when we started, when there was no other fund that would take over our stakes. So these are the two new routes on the top of IPOs in some cases, which are the interesting one, and in some cases we still take the option basically to sell back to the shareholders.
Let's turn now to the Egyptian market. You're a Pan-African firm, so you have a wide perspective over Africa and further beyond. So what's your view of the Egyptian private equity market for the next few years?
So listen, we've only been in Egypt for the past 4 or 5 years. We've done now 2, probably soon 3 and 4 investments in Egypt. And so it's a market that is probably one of the most interesting markets in Africa right now. It took us time to get there, because the perception until recently was that Egypt was more part of the Middle East than of Africa. This has been changing over the past 10 years with a proactive approach of opening up Egypt to East Africa first, and now to the rest of the continent. And so, in order for us to invest, as I was saying in the beginning, it was important for us to be present and have a team. And so, which is the first thing that we've done before doing our first investment. We opened an office, we dedicated one person. So the way we work first is that we take one of the partner level principal investment officer and dedicate them to the team, so that basically there is a transfer of know-how to the local team that is recruited. And then we do what we've done everywhere. We start meeting with entrepreneurs and founders to basically get to know them, but also basically for them to get to know us. And so in Egypt, it's probably one of the most interesting markets, given the depth of its private markets. It's only probably comparable to South Africa and maybe Nigeria and Kenya, but probably deeper from a sophistication of players. And it's a market where you also need to have open eyes, like in all markets, so to know with whom you're working with at the end of the day, and the nature of the shareholders you want to co-invest with. And so this requires a local team, and requires also to understand the history of the country. And so Egypt has a specific history that we got to understand and to know, so that we could understand what's investment strategy. And we're focusing now on, I would say, mid-sized companies, probably companies with an enterprise value of about 50 to $200 million dollars. That's our bread and butter. In sectors where we have a clear added value, like in the pharma sector, into the industrial sectors, into the financial sectors, and these are the into FMCG and distribution and logistics. I mean, these are the sectors where we've had great experiences, we have great knowledge, and we can help companies grow from local Egyptian groups into regional champions. And this is really the way we try to define our specificity, that we take groups that have a presence usually in one, probably more 2 or 3 countries, and try to design with them a strategy to make them a regional leader into a specific segment or sector.
But let's turn now to the future plans of AfricInvest. So thanks for the overview that you've given us. So what are the future plans for growth of AfricInvest? Is it bigger funds? Is it a wider region? Is it other products? What's your vision for the future?
So listen, it's a mix of these. I think we've grown our funds and our investment size, but at a steady way, by probably doubling the size of our flagship funds, multiplying the size by probably a factor of 1.5 to 2 every 4 to 5 years. So that's what we've done. But that's a normal, I would say, curve for any successful private equity fund, no matter where. Some have known, of course, much greater and much more accelerated curve there. The other approach that we have is that we have, beside the flagship funds, we have built today a platform on which basically we can build all different kind of fund strategies. The platform consists of a common ground of function in our company, whether this is middle office, back office, responsible investing. We have a great legal team, and we have a great in general support team to the different investment teams that we have. We have already now about 6, even 7 now, different investment strategies. A mid cap, a small cap one. We have a cross-border investment strategy. We have a financial sector dedicated team. We have an innovation team doing VC investments at growth stages, and we have a private debt team, and we have a listed equity team, and all of them rely on this common platform. We've been building also an information system that helps the team basically share information and also simplify the life of our middle office team and back office teams. And we're using also plenty of external tools on this. So how do we grow from here? Different approaches. First, there are specific opportunities in Africa that are growing quite fast now into specific sectors, essentially. And we're looking to basically have probably dedicated vehicles to these to tackle those opportunities. So that's one. Second, we decided 5 years ago to stop raising, I would say, local funds. We used to have a series of country-based funds, much smaller in size, investing essentially in SMEs. We decided that this should not be any more part of our strategy. Too small, and it takes exactly the same amount of time and attention for a small fund than for a bigger fund. And so the way we are developing now is more in terms of diversifying our fund strategies and having sector-focused funds, and also diversifying our investment strategies from a commercial to impact standpoint. Having most of our funds do have an impact flavor, but are essentially commercial funds from a return standpoint. There's plenty of opportunities now into impact investment, and we're looking also at this now. And we've recently added a VC fund to our platform. We haven't done this alone. We have done this with a partner called Cathay Innovation, that is one of the greatest VC firm now globally. And the idea is also to grow that asset class, because in Africa today, there is probably an opportunity that is as big on the innovation side than on the private equity side or the mature company side, given the fact that the private sector is not as developed, is thinner in Africa in general than in Europe or other more developed countries. And so innovation now is taking more and more space. And if you look at the volume of investment in innovation versus private equity, they're not exactly at par, but they soon will be, probably, given the different the curves on and the growth of VC investment versus PE investment.
I'd like to ask you about diversity. Now, there's been quite a bit of debate about diversity in private equity in developed countries, which is usually about gender and representation of minority groups. So how does diversity play itself out in a Pan-African basis, both within your own firm and within the companies you invest in?
It's a very interesting question, and it is a question that's, I think the diversity question, both from a gender but also from a local and mix of culture standpoint, is something that has always been at the heart of our HR policy. We've had from the start, since we started to transform from a local actor to regional, now continental actor, we've had this approach to say we need to be local wherever we are. And so that's one. And so we've been hiring. So we now have, out of 80 people, we have about probably 18 to 20 different nationalities within the company. Not only Africans, but also global. I think that's really the approach. We have an environment that is composed of a relationship that we build with local entrepreneurs, but at the same time, we have a relationship that we're building with global investors. And so we need basically to be faithful to that topology, I would say, of cultures with whom we're interacting and in which we're navigating on a daily basis. So that is one aspect of diversity. The other one is a gender diversity, which is, I need to say, more difficult to achieve, has been at least so far, but on which we have, at least in the past 2 years, taken proactive objectives that we want to achieve. So that's important to say. But let me give you one example. We've instituted 3 years ago an internship program where we tried through this internship program to detect talents that we want to hire later. And so we tried. So the first decision that we've made was to say we need to have a positive discrimination into this internship program for girls versus boys. And we aren't able today to fill that requirement. And so it's probably because we are based into we ask people to travel a lot, but we do take I would say the approach to have I would say a balanced family and personal life within our company for people who basically develop their own interest in their family together with, or how to say this, while developing their professional career. And so this is something that that's on which we've been working, and that is definitely an important component for us, and I think by which we are judging ourselves before being judged by others. That's the way we put it.
I'd like to ask you about the role that the diaspora can play, the African diaspora, be it North African or West or wherever, in terms of fund managers or in terms of entrepreneurs or company managers. Is there an important role for the diaspora in the private equity ecosystem?
Currently, no. It's it's PE is a very localized industry, and so the in the PE space, diaspora has not been playing an important role, at least until now. I hope that things change there, but our vis-a-vis in Europe, in the US, or in Asia have been from Europe, from Americans or Canadians and Chinese and Middle Eastern in different regions where we were raising money at the time. However, in the VC space, the diaspora is playing a very important role. First, because unlike PE, VC doesn't know borders. Often, a startup or interesting startup that is being founded has founders that are sometimes based in the Silicon Valley, or co-founder locally in Egypt, with funds both from Egypt and from the US and sometimes from Europe. And so in this particular space, there is no set rules, and the localization plays less of a role. And so in Egypt in particular, like in Nigeria, I think the diaspora is playing a very important role to dynamize the pipeline of opportunities. It's playing a role also to create and found interesting companies for their market back at home, using the strength of both markets. So an example from an HR standpoint on the VC space is a company that will be hiring some very specialized resources in the US, because basically they can only be found there, into a much deeper HR pool, and having operation on the ground in Egypt with an R&D often in Egypt. And so this is taking and using the strength of both markets, but then fundraising both locally and internationally in the US. This is a very common use case that we see in the VC sector. And so, in terms of creating a new generation of entrepreneurs and also a new dynamic from a private sector standpoint, the diaspora can definitely play a role there.
Okay, Khaled, it's been a fascinating discussion. I'd like to thank you very much for your time and for your valuable insights into the market. And I hope to meet you again sometime in the future. Thank you very much.
I hope so. Thank you, Gavin.